Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming, and a bit of a fun talk with Wilds and Monster Hunter Large, because obviously we have the expansion coming up at some point in the future. What do we hope to see in the game? Well, obviously a lot of new monsters. The amount we got compared to returning monsters, I was really happy with. So more of that I'm very happy to see. But of course, for a bit of fun, in regards to returning monsters, what would be awesome to fight in Wilds in that updated context? What would actually fit in Wilds at that, and what even maybe seems likely, because there's a couple that really does. So I'm going to pick 10, we'll go from like bottom to top, the ones I want to see the most at one, right? So at the bottom, I'm just going to put Dodogama just for a bit of fun. Look, he's not the most mechanically crazy guy, he's not the most challenging fight, but something about fighting Dodogama, I find it very fun every single time, and I miss it. For some reason, he's one of the highlights of Worlds for me. He's just an outrageously cute monster that really goes hand in hand for me with, say, Chatacabra. All the stuff we saw with Chatacabra with the early release versions, and Chatacabra walking out into the sun and just sunbathing. Something about Dodogama and Chatacabra, I need them to meet, they would coexist. That's probably my only silly entry, so let's move on. At number 9 and 8, I have two that are kind of interchangeable. So, Magnamalo, Nergigante. We have the two base flagships for their respective game versions, Rise being Magnamalo and World being Nergigante. Something about both of these fights is incredibly fun to fight hundreds and hundreds of times, and obviously I've done that. I remember with, say, the demo version of Rise, Magnamalo being an incredible challenge with the limited gear you had, lack of skills, and really restrictive quest timer. That combined with the fight just feeling great. You got the Hellfire mechanic, the ridiculous dive bomb that he does, but the physical nature of monsters like that I always really enjoy. And that's partly why I think Nergigante is also a fantastic option. It's a real brutish fight, where Nergigante doesn't really fly up and hang in the air often, only slamming down at specific times. There's a lot of like full body charges, headbutts and drags, and the way the spikes fly at you. The incredibly satisfying aspect of that fight where you're trying to break off the spikes before they can harden. And that's always been a main, important, enjoyable part of Monster Hunter fights for me. Targeting specific parts, breaking them off, and that changing the fight. A lot of fights these days are hitting the head, maybe like the wing arm or something. But I really love the idea of greatly changing a fight because you cut off the tail and that now changes what the monster's actually able to do and maybe even changes its behavior based on that. So I enjoyed the whole breaking off the spikes as quick as possible thing with Nergigante. I enjoyed the whole management of the Hellfire with Magnamalo. Both of them, interestingly, are kind of similar shaped monsters. So I would be happy with either of them, but imagine like a title update where they just dropped both of these flagships of World and Rise into it at once. That would be really cool. But let's get into stuff that I think is actually quite likely and hopeful, based on what's already there. For number 7 for me, I've got Shagaru Magala, which I think is very likely, with Gore basically being a base version of the fight, and actually one of the toughest at launch. A lot of people feel like Gore was harder than Arkveld, though I think both were pretty tough, at least in the context we had. In the expansion, seeing the evolution of Gore then would make sense. With the recent Nadia storyline with Gore, that really felt like it wasn't leading up to a particularly strong Gore fight. It really felt like you were going to go into Shagaru, or at least that's what it should have been, but they couldn't just slam Shagaru into that update. Shagaru then is essentially the adult Gore, right? You basically shed its skin, so the colours change from the black to gold. The whole look of it is less tattered like with the wings. It now stands strong and proud, almost like in a diamond shape. It hangs in the air while it rains down these purple beams of frenzy on you. So yes, it continues the idea of frenzy, but with a truer state where you can't actually end it where you can with Gore. And Shagaru just fits logically into this world, the progression of Wilds. Obviously they did this whole frenzy theme, which was really cool, and they could lean back into that or add to it with something simple and logical as Shagaru. Maybe it's not the most exciting addition, we literally had him in Rise as well, but it just feels like it makes a lot of sense, so we'll see. But here's one I thought we were really going to see in Rise, specifically not Wilds, and I still feel like we were meant to. I would love to see a return of Zamtrios. Zamtrios the ice shark, with that comical side to it, is like this serious ice armored freak, and it's got that satisfying aspect I was talking about where you break off the ice as a concept. But then it's got the other side of the ridiculous huge balloon form, which is fantastic. I remember seeing it for the first time and being utterly bewildered, and you can go look at like the original Probe series where Cotton has his original reaction to it. That's a perfect example. It's just this insane experience we've all had when it suddenly balloons up in the way that it does. So yes, we thought we'd see it in Rise from early on when we first saw the little like baby versions, the Zamites, in the ice region of that game. But for some reason, it was never there. Maybe we can blame COVID and how that greatly impacted the development of Rise and the version we got at launch. But outside of that, I think it's just a fun monster with a unique mechanic to it and a fun design, as silly as it all is. And one topic we're going to talk about next is the fantastic skeleton of the Leviathans, which would go crazy for Zamtrios if they did something similar for an update for the balloon skeletons, if we're going to call it that. So yes, I'd love to see that. But above that, I think even more likely and reasonable is Nagarala, the snake monster, the snake wyvern. This is one I really thought we'd have in base wilds. I remember seeing the Scarlet Forest for the first time and seeing those water-filled like plateaus, and I have a memory of fighting a Nagarala in GU in a similar location. With them talking about the work they put into the Leviathan skeletons then to make the whole constricting mechanics possible for Balahara, I thought, yeah, definitely snake wyverns are on the menu then. Maybe we get a new one and then we get Nagarala alongside that. But that didn't happen. To be fair, it's not like we didn't get totally new stuff like the cephalopods. They were incredible, but I do feel like snake wyverns were almost like meant for wilds. The incredible mechanics of Balahara where the tail points at you and tracks before stabbing, or the way they constrict around the target during the turf wars, or worming its way up a pillar that you might break off from the overhang. The constricting snake wyvern type just makes complete sense with mechanics in the game already like that. So it definitely feels like a miss we don't already have it in wilds, but maybe, hopefully, we'll see it in some forms with something like Nagarala in the expansion. But moving on, let's now talk about one I would really love to see in an updated form, Gammoth. It's funny, the Fated Four, as they're known, all had some updated form with World and Rise. You've got Mizu, even in Wilds. You've got Glaive and Asalos with much more recent forms. And don't get me wrong, they are really cool. Arguably, I would say that I would rather see Mizu, Glaive and Asalos before seeing an updated Gammoth. But we've had the other three now, in multiple forms in fact. Meanwhile, Gammoth just hasn't had that current gen version. So maybe in this expansion, it'll be finally the right time. There are some challenges to think about though. It's a huge fanged beast, so you might have some large monster issues to contend with, like making it mechanically interesting beyond it accidentally hip checked you or stepped on you. I think that's important. But you definitely could do some fun stuff with, say, the trunk, as if it's like a unique arm. Again, they've got the clever skeleton mechanics, right? That could come in clutch. But think of the cephalopods with their tentacles and how they track you and interact. They essentially have the technology already to do something weird and interesting with Gammoth's trunk, like it has a brain of its own. They could do some crazy attacks and combos, working with that, outside of it just being a source of like the ice or snow. And obviously there's plenty of raw strength potential behind that big monster beyond hopefully just boring body checks and slams. But largely for this one, I just want to see an updated version already. And with the current tech and mechanics they've created, they could do a really unique and cool job with it. But yes, that brings us to top 3 that I'd like to see in the game. Let's start with Dalamadur, the Serpent King Dragon, which, as we said just earlier, snake wyverns, they're very cool, and I think not having them in wilds is a waste. And this is like the biggest version of that. We have quite impressive mechanics with the skeletons of the game right now, so why not take that, expand on it, go crazy with Dalamadur. Not only is this a hopeful concept, but one that I think is actually likely because of the wounded hollow arena. It's essentially filled and somewhat made from the arching bones of that massive monster. This went crazy for the concept of World, where we had the whole area, Rotten Vale, and the Dalamadur skeleton that essentially was the map that you were running around. So they played around with this concept twice now. Dalamadur would essentially be the largest monster fight in Wilds if they were to just drop it today, and much bigger than even the bigger monsters that we've had in Wilds like dahaad, Zoshia, now Gog. Extremely large monsters like Kolv, We just haven't seen that in Wilds. On that note, there's also been no classic world-esque siege fights so far. For that, by the way, I'm really happy. I don't like the progression system they did for those in World. I don't like not being able to fight a monster from the start. Like, you can have bits of it with like Fatalis or whatever, where you're using siege stuff during the fight, but I really dislike the idea of going in, kind of tickling a monster, leaving the hunt, going in, tickling the monster, until eventually we're allowed to fight it for real. I think overall they've done a much better job of avoiding that in Wilds. At the same time, I do think they have to do something different and special for a monster that's that large. In fact, as far as I'm aware, the Dalamadur in 4 wasn't even a full-on sized one, since, say, the Rotten Vales map was so much bigger than the one that you fight there. Maybe that was just a young one. We'd also want the environment of this fight to work for it. Originally, you're fighting at the top of like a mountain range with all these pillars and spikes for Dalamadur to wrap itself around. But you take the landscape of Wilds and that already works. Like, there's plenty of regions they could just create in that huge landscape, but there's literally, say, the peaks of Suja all around the hub. That makes sense already. The big bones in the hub themselves. To me, this feels like one we will see with what's already there and what's maybe been hinted at this time. I just hope that they do a good job of it, obviously, and personally, I hope we avoid progression aspects of a siege. Just let me fight it, like, properly from the start, and I'll be happy. For number 2, this might be more controversial, I guess. I want to see Alatreon again. Look, to get to the point on it immediately, I absolutely loved Alatreon in World. It was like the first fight in World that really made me lock in, like I struggled to beat it the first time. And I had a fantastic time engaging with different weapons that I normally wouldn't play to engage with the element feature. Ultimately beating it for the first time with dual blades, which I'd only really played around with back then, and then that became one of my main weapons for an extended period of time after Alatreon because I enjoyed it so much. And how happy am I to say that, because Wilds' version of dual blades is one of the best I've ever seen. But Alatreon, I feel, is just a cool monster in design, and Alatreon's weird horn element thing just adds another layer to it. If you think about Wilds though, we have 2 weapons, not 1. So you could have one element setup weapon and another element setup weapon, which works for this concept. And we had that with GOG, where you would use fire to soften the oil armor and get through that, and then swap to dragon for the final phase. Obviously, we wouldn't want the exact same fight as the world, we'd want an updated moveset on top of what was already there. And nothing in the game right now really makes me think Alatreon's totally happening, like there's lore and implications. I just want it because it's one of my favourite fights of the series, and I think it would be particularly good in Wilds. What is way more reasonable and possible is my number 1 pick, which is Fatalis. As generic and obvious as this is, Fatalis is one of the coolest monsters in all of the Monster Hunter series, and that final fight in Iceborne, my god, that was incredible. I refused to get any help when I was fighting it the first time. I wanted to solo it purely on my own, and then I wanted to learn a bunch of different weapons just to fight Fatalis with it. So it holds a very special place in my heart for Monster in general, because it just encouraged me to do a lot of stuff that I hadn't done before. Like Alatreon was what got me to try dual blades, like properly for the first time. Fatalis was encouraging me with switch axe. And outside of the fact that it's a mechanically challenging and well-designed fight in World, they could obviously add to it a lot in Wilds. Would it fit in the game, and is it possible? I think yes, very much so. There's already a lot of Fatalis theories for Wilds, with just Zoshia's existence in general, right? But then there's all the stuff with the Diva, and is she gonna like summon Fatalis? Is Fatalis gonna attack the hub? The white nature of the Diva, is it actually going to be the old like white Fatalis that we're going to see instead, which would obviously be different from base Fatalis that we had in World? There's plenty of potential there. So yeah, there's not a ton I'm going to say about this. I think a lot of people feel like Fatalis is coming to Wilds. Maybe the expansion is the place for that instead. It would be really cool though in, say, the expansion, where we could have like an arch-tempered version of Zoshia that we didn't get for the base game. And then you've just got like Fatalis or white Fatalis there as well. And you can really see the differences and similarities between them. But yeah, there's just my like fun chat about what monsters I'd love to see return from previous games in Wilds and the expansion. And hopefully you're not waiting an extreme amount of time to hear about the expansion, any news, any information. We're looking forward to it. Until next time then, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.